Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm filming a video that I've had in my mind for a while. Just a little trip down memory lane, sharing some really old blog posts from 7 or 8 years ago. So I graduated with a degree in illustration in 2010, and that's when I was just starting out blogging. At the time I was sharing lots of my student work, but I also started blogging about my experience being an illustration graduate, and these were the posts that got the most views and the most interaction. That kind of encouraged me to carry on documenting my experience as a new graduate. So I'm going to share with you some of the blog posts I wrote just to see how things have changed for me, see if there are still similar sort of issues happening for illustration or creative graduates today. The first blog post that I'm going to read is dated Tuesday the 31st of May 2011, and I'm going to leave these blog posts linked as well if you want to have a look at them. They are still up. And this blog post is titled A Degree in Illustration, Reflections on My Year as a Graduate, Part 1, Spec Work, brackets, boo. Let's see. Last year I graduated from Middlesex University with a 2-1 in illustration. It was an exciting time. I'd never worked so hard in my life, and I was getting a positive response from my paintings. And then I talk about how I was optimistic about how everything was going to go. Fast forward a few months and I'm working in a dreary Italian restaurant in my hometown of Bristol, and on the verge of tears 99.9% of the time. And then I talk about waitressing and how it's not the job that's suited for me and how I hate it and I feel drained. Having said that, I did manage to do some work. I completed a commission for Redwood Publishing, my first paid job. I was accepted into the AOI annual images and was featured in Ballad of magazine, Sketchbook magazine and Amelia's magazine. I accepted a lot of spec work, and by that I mean jobs with no payment at the end of them. Of course, back then I'd never heard of the phrase spec work, and was giving my work away for free in the hope that it would drum up some publicity for my illustrations. And then I talk about why I decided to do that. I thought it was a good opportunity to get my work seen rather than just sitting on my website. And then I start to reflect on actually what that spec work meant. Sure, people were looking at my work, but were they the right people? Were they the people that could offer me work in future? Of course not. It seems that spec work has become the norm for many creative graduates. Websites are as important as printed publications, and asking an artist to produce an image for a website somehow feels less outrageous than asking them for an image for a printed publication. It's sounding very familiar to how it is today. 7 years down the line, I'm still asked to work for free on a regular basis, and I'm sure a lot of other illustrators are as well. And yeah, it's kind of sad that it hasn't changed very much at all. And now I'm talking about competitions, and I recently did a video about competitions and how damaging they can be to the creative industries, so I'm going to leave that linked. Definitely recommend watching that if you haven't. I say, as it's graduation time, I've also begun to notice a lot of competitions being announced. Competitions. Asking young creatives to submit their artwork for a chance to win prizes. It just angers me that they ask trained graphic designers and illustrators to produce their designs for the latest film posters or whatever and expect not to pay a soul. The prizes are never worth the effort. This sounds familiar. And the voting system they use makes me think of X Factor. Is this what we want the world of illustration to become, where talented artists are rewarded with useless cinema tickets and yet more publicity? So far this is just sounding like a lot of sense. It's quite sad that it's still the same situation for me as well, even 7 years on, even after nearly 5 years of being full-time freelance, is still the same issues as I was facing as a graduate. And if you are a graduate yourself, I'd love to hear your opinion on what I say in these blog posts and whether you think anything has changed or got worse or got better. And then I give 4 tips. Number 1, know your value. You've got a skill many others don't have, and companies will pay for it. You just have to make them pay for it. Yeah, I'm still working on that. Use your time wisely. In order to make these companies pay you for the work, you have to look the part. Instead of spending time creating free work for others, create work for your portfolio. This is something I've said the entire time I've had this YouTube channel. I still believe that. I still believe that if you're going to create some new work, it should be for you and your portfolio and your improvement rather than someone else's project, which they should have a budget for. Be active on social networks. So I recently did a video on social media for artists and creatives, so check that out as well. It seems like I've just had the same advice throughout the whole of my career, but sometimes the best advice is the most obvious and simple. Number 4 is accept this might be a long struggle. It's still a struggle, and I think it's going to be a struggle for the rest of my days. I can see that. It's painful not being able to see the finish line, but keep going and one day you just might make it. That's interesting to think about newly graduated me and what she would think of me now. I think I'm pretty proud of how far I've come. I've got a lot of things that are published. I've got this YouTube channel that I've been doing for a long time, and I'm still leading by example. I'm still following all of these tips that I've given here. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of myself, keeping on with the struggle. And then I did a follow-up blog post. Reflections on my year as a graduate, part 2, university education. And this was in June of 2011. Considering it's now been an entire year since I graduated, I've taken it upon myself to write down what I've learnt this year to help others, but also as a sort of therapy, which I feel I need after the year it's been. So from my last post on the matter, we've gathered that I haven't done too well in the real world since flying the education nest. By not too well, I pretty much mean that the Bambi-eyed optimism that I felt at my degree show has slowly been chiselled away. That's sad. For anyone who's been through it, you know how hard it is. The competition is huge, the jobs are few, and the pay is low. And I simply wasn't equipped with the tools I needed to survive. Are any graduates feeling that at the moment? I bet that's something that just doesn't change the kind of free fall into the real world. After the nice cushiony environment of being a university student, I still miss the university days and being able to go down to the library and just spend the day researching artists and studying their work. Not have to worry about everything I produce making money. Don't get me wrong, it's still stressful. I still felt stressed and I was working a hell of a lot, but it was exciting and it was a really creative time in my life. And then I'm talking about my university, and this blog post, I remember it being quite controversial because I mentioned my university, which I don't hold any grudges against, and I kind of regret mentioning the university. I was just trying to be really honest. I thought my course was good and my tutors were really great as well. But yeah, this is 7-year ago me who was quite exhausted after her first year of graduation. There are a few things on reflection that I'm unhappy about. My final year felt rushed. We were working hard on portfolio building projects, our dissertations, and worrying about grades. I don't think any of us could see past our busy desk spaces to even consider the future after these projects were finished. But we really should have been shown it. It was our tutor's responsibility to make us aware of it. Looking back, it seems strange that we were building these portfolios, but I had little to no knowledge of how to use them in the future. We'd all developed our own individual style, and whilst I'm grateful to my university for allowing me the time to develop it, a visual language is worthless if you don't have a clue what to do with it. I don't know what I think about this now. In hindsight, I can see that you do just need to have this big painful learning curve of figuring out how to become commercial, and I'm not really sure 3 years at university is enough time to figure out how you're going to fit into the commercial world of illustration. I do kind of wish there was more help on the business side of things, like pricing and contracts and tax and copyright, all the things basically I want to put on my channel to help illustrators who are also finding this area lacking in their course. I remember that we did have a series of workshops about the business side of illustration with a practicing illustrator, but there can't have been more than 3, and I for one felt completely overwhelmed upon hearing this information for the first time. I could have done with many more sessions. I now now realise that those workshops were an introduction at best, and there were so many more things that we needed from them. I guess that makes it a bit more balanced. When I think back, I find it absurd that our uni happily waved goodbye to us, a group of unprepared, ill-equipped illustration graduates. Especially as we're walking into a recession, but I suppose that's another matter. I know that we were ill-equipped because it's taken me exactly a year to realise what I should have been told a year ago. It seems that my uni was unaware of the key factors that make up the modern illustration world. I've listed below what I feel are the most pressing and sadly neglected issues that need to be tackled by universities. So yeah, I'd be really interested to hear if you are a student or a recent graduate, if you feel like your course is lacking in any of these things. The importance of a strong online presence, a website, blog, and a strong grasp of social media networking. At my uni, the focus was on a printed portfolio, but often this isn't practical. Yeah, I still get emails and messages from students who are wondering about printed physical portfolios and how important they are because their tutors are pushing for them and they're having to be printed, and that's quite an expensive thing to do, and it does baffle me a little bit because I've rarely shown physical paintings to the clients. They don't have time to look at that. I barely even meet my clients. I just have a website. Number 2, that print is diminishing. Illustration is adapting to that change, but universities need to address this as our graduates are walking head on into it. I think at the time there was a lot of media about print dying and a lot of magazines and newspapers were closing down. In hindsight, I don't think it was as bad as people were making it out to be. Number 3, that a career in illustration is rarely instantaneous. Unis must advise their students on how to cope until they make it. That's a really good point actually. When I think about my course mates, I don't think there was very many of us that went straight into being illustrators, which was never discussed at uni. It was never mentioned that there would be this gap. I think I was just quite naive as well. Number 4, how to make money from illustration. How to be a freelancer, how to gain clients, how to liaise with clients, how to manage money. To a certain extent, I still agree with that, but also, like I said, I do think it is experience that helps you to learn all of these things, and there has to be a little bit of room for trial and error, especially with liaising with clients. You can be taught to an extent how to do this, but it's only when you start interacting with companies that you really understand what they need from you and what you need from them. Just writing this short list of issues has angered me more. Why is it I feel we need to educate our educators? I was a bit more melodramatic back then, but then I finish off the blog post with, I've learnt the hard way that surviving in the real world on pretty pictures alone is just never going to work. Luckily for me, I was and still am, not anymore, dating a graphic designer who was able to teach me how to use Photoshop and InDesign. That was really useful actually. Computer skills are so very important for any young creative, and this fact was just not stressed on my course. Yeah. I agree with that. I think being tech savvy as an illustrator can really help you move your career forward, and just being able to present your work in a really professional, clean way is just so important. And my final paragraph is rather damning. I might even go so far as to suggest that illustration might not be a valid course anymore. You only have to look at the illustration celebrities such as Jessica Heish and Kate Moros to realise that you have to have a whole load of other skills under your belt to make money from it, such as graphic design and web design, typography and printmaking. For the very few, it is enough to create beautiful images, but for many, it's just not realistic, especially in this current climate. So at the time, the UK was going through a really massive recession, so there wasn't much money, and it was quite stressful, so I think a lot of this blog post is tinged with that. Perhaps illustration needs to go hand in hand with graphic design, and perhaps illustration students need to be educated as fine art students are, that you can become a fine artist/illustrator, or you can work within the arts sector, as I'm now striving to. Oh, interesting. So at this point I was thinking that I probably wouldn't be an illustrator. So I have another blog post, but I think I might leave that till next time, seeing as those two blog posts were a pair and they were discussing university and that kind of thing. So let me know if you liked this format for a video, and I will film the next one to follow up from this. I'd love to hear your experience of being an illustration student or graduate, and what things you thought were lacking at your university. Just want to stress that I loved my time at university and don't hold anything against my particular uni or my tutors or anything like that. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to subscribe, then please do. I make weekly videos about being an illustrator, and you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Patreon. All my links will be in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!